Live, the Raiders have hired Pete Carroll as their new head coach. Jeremy Fowler joining us with more. Jeremy, how did this come together?
Well, Laura, the Raiders narrowed their search after they lost out to Ben Johnson to the Bears. And I'm told Pete Carroll rose to the top because his in-person interview was really strong, to the point that they were worried about losing Carroll to another team potentially. Minority owner Tom Brady has always admired and embraced the way that Carroll could build a program and build a good defense. And so Steve Spagnuolo from Kansas City was in the mix here, but Carroll specifically sold this team on a vision for a team in transition. And look, I reached out to a few former Carroll lieutenants in Seattle. Both expect Carroll to be a great fit in Las Vegas, but they also both pointed out they would not be surprised if Carroll reached out to Russell Wilson, possibly trying to sign the free agent, make amends for what went wrong at the end of that Seattle era. One of them even pointed out that Carroll and Wilson began to rekindle their relationship about a year ago or so. Wilson's always been intrigued by wearing the black and silver, so could be a back pocket item for later.
That's really interesting. I didn't necessarily think about that when I first heard this news, but I'm sure there'll be a lot more time to see if that happens. Thanks to Jeremy. More from you later on in the show on the Commanders. Now, the Raiders will be the fourth franchise that Pete Carroll has been the head coach for, along with the Jets, Patriots, and Seahawks. He'll be the sixth coach in NFL history to be the head coach for four or more franchises, and just the third in the Super Bowl era. Pete Carroll turned 74 years old in September. He'll surpass Romeo Crennel as the oldest head coach in NFL history. Mina, you watched Carroll for years as we welcome you on to the show. Mina Kimes, RC, and Dan Orlovsky here. You watched him every Sunday as a Seahawks fan, right? Is he a good fit in Vegas?
I think so. You know, as we've talked about these coaching hires, one thing I always say is, well, we don't know how he's going to be as a leader, as a CEO. Can he run the organization? We know that with Pete Carroll. Yeah. I mean, the man has literally written books on leadership. He is a culture guy. He's a player's coach, so that's not a question mark. But I also think he addresses or satisfies some of the things that the Raiders in particular need. Number one, he has proven that he can build an environment and offense around a young quarterback. Even if they were to bring in Russell Wilson as a bridge, there's still going to be a young quarterback in the building, either this year or at some point. And the other thing is fixing the pass defense. I mean, Pete Carroll is a genius when it comes to coaching DBs. We saw that in Seattle. Even when the defense struggled, he was still trying different things schematically. So I think his mind in terms of addressing that defense, which is sorely needed in Las Vegas, will also be very helpful.
I think what this shows to me is that the Raiders wanted a proven winner, and not only someone that can build an organization or build a culture, but someone that could change a culture. Also make the very difficult decisions. Remember, Matt Flynn was signed to the Seattle Seahawks when Russell Wilson was drafted in the third round, and he went through that preseason and he saw leadership skills. He saw the talent in Russell Wilson that said, I'm going to forego the guaranteed money we've given Matt Flynn and go with the best player and the guy that gives us the best chance to win football games. It's going to take that sort of confidence. It's going to take that sort of integrity when it comes to decision making to build up a program that has bounced from coach to coach to coach in the last 4 or 5 years. It's about stability. It's about something that's proven. They don't want to be the potter that's taking the clay and molding it. They want to go to the nice place and buy the fine china, and that's what they did in Pete Carroll.
Yeah, I really like the move. I would say this. Well, who are the coordinators? And not only for the X's and O's, but for the future. I think teams in the NFL need to start handling their assistant coaches and coordinators like the Packers do quarterbacks, always having the next one ready. And Pete Carroll's 74. He's great. If you get 3 or 4 really good years out of him, that's awesome. You've reestablished a new identity. But you better have coordinators that are ready to step in that head coaching role so that continues and you don't have to try and restart. The second thing is immediately I was like, who's going to be your quarterback? The more I've thought about it, I don't think that's going to be a priority for them. Pete Carroll, to everyone's point, went a long way with the Seattle Seahawks to the Super Bowl with a quarterback in the third round, but because they had a dominant football team. Tom Brady became the greatest quarterback of all time as his 6th-round pick because he had many dominant players around him. Near the end of his career in New England, those players started to decrease. He leaves New England after struggling at the end. Tom Brady can't play anymore, goes to Tampa, who had a loaded roster of talent around him, and won a Super Bowl. I think they will build the roster way before they go address the quarterback.
It's an interesting point. It does make you think, could they even grab one of these guys in the draft this year that would be a younger guy, Quinn Ewers even, something like that?
Yeah, I think they would entertain it, but I think that they are going to do everything they can to build the infrastructure so the quarterback is in many ways the last piece.
Mina, what did you think about the Russell Wilson suggestion that Jeremy made?
Yeah, as a bridge quarterback on a reasonable deal, I think it could make some sense. I still think that they need to pursue a young quarterback. Doesn't have to be in the first round, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's under consideration for the reasons that Jeremy outlined.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that and plenty of news, of course. But it is championship weekend in the
over the success that he achieved in Seattle when he led the Seahawks to the second-best win percentage in the conference in his tenure. Carroll won more playoff games in a 10-year span than the Raiders have won since 1983. God, that hurts. Senior NFL insider Adam Schefter is with us on SportsCenter. Adam, what more can you tell us about how this deal came together?
Well, Randy, at a time where many teams are looking for the new toy, the Raiders decided to go with something that is old and reliable. They hired Pete Carroll on a 3-year contract agreement that will make him the oldest head coach in NFL history next season. He'll be 74. He acts like he's 34 and has the energy of a 34-year-old. And the Raiders surveyed the landscape and recognized in the AFC West, there's a lot of good teams with a lot of good quarterbacks and a lot of good coaches. They know that they can't make up that ground overnight. They decided to opt for a simple, sure, proven way in Pete Carroll, who now goes from teaching at USC and goes to Las Vegas to now go coach the Raiders. He'll bring his ways, his methods, implement his culture, and this is exactly what the Raiders were looking for, somebody that they think can help stabilize and build that organization back up while they try to rebuild it and find a quarterback for the future to keep up with the rest of that teams in that division.
Building in that division, you mentioned the coaches. You have 6 games against the likes of Andy Reid and Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton in Denver, and now Pete Carroll in Las Vegas. Okay, so to what extent, Adam, was minority owner Tom Brady involved in this process?
I don't think Tom Brady does anything where he's standing on the sideline just idly observing. I think Tom Brady was absolutely intimately involved in this process, had a voice, had a loud voice, and I think his opinions were heard. Yes, there were other limited minority partners. Yes, there is Mark Davis, but also there aren't many people in that room that understand the sport, that have the stature and the profile that Tom Brady does. So to answer your question, Randy, he was very involved. And Tom Brady had a tremendous respect for Pete Carroll. And he was obviously one of the main reasons that the organization decided to go in that way. There were a lot of people collaborating to come up with that call. They just hired their general manager, John Spytek from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He also had a voice and an opinion. But I think everybody came together and recognized that the safest, surest bet for this team moving forward was the former head coach of the Seahawks, the former coach of USC, a man who knows what he's doing, who's made his lifelong profession coaching, and they opted for a safe, sure bet in Pete Carroll.
They got the coach. Now let's see if they can find a quarterback. That is Adam Schefter with the very latest on SportsCenter. Thank you, Adam.